the FHA commissioner during the Clinton administration. He had seen the press release that had gone out last night, and he said, congratulations. But then he added, it is really nice to see business and ethics in the same headline. So thank you very much. It is just wonderful. We also want to thank Josh. Thank you very much, Josh, for nominating us. We wouldn't be here otherwise. And Pat and your colleagues at the Institute and the Center. I think also it's, Mary and I are both products of 16 years of Catholic education. Spent a lot of time with the Jesuits there toward the end, but I'm sure you'll forgive us for that, at different schools. But it's just how much Father Hesburgh has contributed to the transformation of Catholic higher education over the years. And I don't think the New York Times was attributing it to you directly, Father, but last week when they talked about how Catholic education has changed so that's less about indoctrination and more about inspiration. Maybe they were attributing it to you, but it seemed to hit the nail right on the head. Mary's the one who said that I'm delivering this lecture, but I do need to say that this is a joint lecture that we wrote together. Mary will make a couple of comments at the end, but these words are both of ours. So I think what I want to do this afternoon is to share a few thoughts about social entrepreneurship and an ethical choice for individuals and businesses. And it seems highly relevant today after what we are seeing during this past year about the results of predatory lending practices. And then keeping in mind today, April 22nd, is also Earth Day. It ought to remind all of us of the ethical responsibility that we have as stewards to the world for the generations that follow us. As we all experience every day in our lives, we are the beneficiaries of genuine entrepreneurship that has occurred over the generations and over the last several decades in particular. And we see the new products and the services that enrich our lives. Now, when my generation was growing up, the very idea, one couldn't even imagine, as an example, things like iPhones or global positioning satellites or miracle drugs. But because we all have witnessed the material benefits of entrepreneurship, people are turning more and more of their attention to social entrepreneurship as a way to create more for less that can benefit people and societies that have had fewer opportunities to lead a full, rich, and productive life. The men and women of ShoreBank, of whom Karen and Bill are just 2 out of about 500 people, they work every day to apply the best practices of social enterprise in the inner cities of Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland, in the temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest, and the spent mining towns of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and in the villages and towns of Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Cambodia, the former Soviet Union, and nearly 40 other developing countries. As you've already heard, the ShoreBank story really begins in the 1960s, when 4 of us, Mary, myself, Jim Fletcher, and Milton Davis, we were all working together at another bank, and we started brainstorming ideas about how to reverse the decline of Chicago's inner city neighborhoods. Now, at that time, by day, we were acting as bankers. I was wearing my white shirt and tie and looking like a banker. But at night, after work, we would gather at the Eagle Bar, which was nearby, which is where all good ideas ought to happen, and we talked about ways that we could address the entire litany of problems that were dragging down urban neighborhoods. Now, at that time, we also had other experience because our colleague, now deceased, Milton Davis, was very active in the civil rights movement. Jim Fletcher before he joined us, was the Deputy Director of Citizen Action Programs, a major Office of Economic Opportunity program in the 60s. And Mary and I separately had experience working with nonprofit organizations. And at that time, what we really began to realize was how, when we worked as volunteers with not-for-profit organizations, we spent a lot of our time trying to figure out how to meet last week's or sometimes last month's payroll. Yet during the day, we were acting as bankers, making loans that other bankers said could not be made, or more importantly, repaid, okay, and ours were being repaid. And we thought about why can't we bring those two sets of experiences together? So one of the problems that we talked about at the Eagle Bar and other times was redlining. And that was the practice then by which banks simply refused to issue mortgage loans or invest capital in entire neighborhoods that were considered undesirable. That was without reference to the people individually. It was just an entire neighborhood was redlined. Now, these neighborhoods were the same places in which banks were often collecting substantial deposits. One example is the incumbent governor of Massachusetts is the grandson of a man who worked at our bank, I'm getting ahead of the story, in 1973. But his wife, I think, saved probably every penny that the man earned in order to put Deval Patrick through undergraduate school and law school. But it's just a point about the capacity of people to save and try to control their own destiny. So the consequence of redlining back in those days was that capital was transferred from neighborhoods where it could do the most good to places where it could earn the highest return for the bankers. Now, when there is no capital available to invest, neighborhoods wither and die. And in those days, on the south and west sides of Chicago, in the 1960s and 70s, the combination of blockbusting and redlining was quickly turning vibrant neighborhoods into troubled ones. Now, for those of you who are old enough, and there aren't too many of us here this afternoon who are old enough, but this was a time of urban renewal.